Okay, so we built our bones during fetal development. So things you want to think about is like the skull hasn't fully formed yet. There's still going to be pockets of membrane between the bones of the skulls. That makes our fontanelles. And then the endochondral ossification hasn't completed all the way. Most of the bones haven't fully formed yet. The long bones, we have a diaphysis, but we don't have the epiphyses yet. This is the reason why your baby can't just get up and walk around right after birth, because the heads where or the epiphyses where the joints are actually aren't structurally sound because they're still cartilage at this time. The same thing with like the sternum is going to be still parts of cartilage. The hips are still partly cartilage. It takes several years for your bones to completely ossify. And we want to have that time because we're going to see that we also are going to have postnatal development or postnatal growth. So that means what's going to happen to our bone as our child starts to get bigger and bigger. We want to be able to get taller. So I already kind of drew in some stuff here. If you guys need to pause the video for a minute and just draw the same things I did. I used my same coloring scheme where I have my hyaline cartilage is going to be on the superficial edge of each epiphysis. And I'm just going to look at the proximal portion. The distal portion, the same thing is happening. It just makes it easier to draw out. I don't have to draw a whole bunch of stuff right here. So we see that we have our hyaline cartilage on our surface. We have compact bone under that. Then we have spongy bone. We still have a little bit of our medullary cavity too. And we are going to see we have our epiphyseal plate here versus our epiphyseal line. So this is going to be childhood growth or postnatal growth. And then on the other side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my adult remodeling. So you see the difference between growth and remodeling. Okay. So child's bone is going to grow in two ways. It's actually going to grow in width and it's going to grow in length. So we're going to have lengthwise growth and widthwise growth. Lengthwise growth requires cartilage. Because the bone was originally made from cartilage and cartilage became bone, if I want to make more bone, I actually am going to have to start with cartilage. So for lengthwise growth, you're going to take your cartilage and you're going to thicken your epiphyseal plate right here. You're also going to thicken the articular cartilage right there. Because remember, we need to have cartilage so that cartilage is going to become bone. So you can kind of already see how I kind of elongated a little bit, mostly because of the articular cartilage kind of going out a bit right there, right? Then what's going to happen is that cartilage is going to transform into bone. So the older cartilage is going to start to become bone. So right here, it's going to start to become bone towards the diaphysis. And then right underneath where the compact bone was here, we're again going to have our cartilage actually becoming bone, just like that. So you'll have a little bit of a thicker layer of compact bone here and here, but you're also going to have some osteoclasts. So remember, our osteoclasts will make our bone tissue, and then our osteoclasts will come in, and they're going to help us kind of hollow out this area here and become a little bit more spongy bone. So you can already see how my bone has extended or lengthened a little bit as a result of that. Just that minor change. Those are kind of like hopefully bumped it up just a little bit. It's not like you're growing really thick really quickly. Like this is going to happen over years. So even if you're like, I don't see much of a difference, you just kind of have to make your line a little thicker there. Okay, so that's lengthwise growth. So lengthwise growth is going to require articular cartilage and the epiphyseal plate. For widthwise growth, what we want to do here is we want to use the periosteum and the end osteum. And actually, I forgot to draw my end osteum right there. My end osteum is right there. And just remember, we have our osteogenic cells underneath our periosteum. So I'm going to just draw this on one side so you can kind of see how I'm going to push to one side, but you think about it's happening on both sides. So the osteoblasts that are just underneath the periosteum are going to lay down a new layer of compact bone, basically like that. Some of them get stuck in that bone and they become osteocytes. And then some of them are going to move as we do this. I forgot I can't erase anymore. Basically, we're going to see that our periosteum here is going to shift over. It's going to shift outwards like that. And then our osteogenic cells will still be there in that layer. Okay. Now you're got thicker. So you want to think about the other side is also going to get thicker. So what's going to happen to your medullary cavity? Over time, your medullary cavity is going to get thinner and thinner and thinner. So we need to also make sure that our medullary cavity widens. So we're going to use our osteoclasts inside of the medullary cavity, and they're going to start to degrade a little bit of this compact bone layer. So as they degrade that little bit of compact bone layer, you see how I widen my bone. I just kind of pushed my bone outward, and my medullary cavity will basically not be the same width, but will be in proportion to how wide my diaphysis became. So I'm going to lengthen and I'm going to widen, and I'm going to kind of do this simultaneously, basically so that my bone doesn't get really long really fast and my bone doesn't get really big really fast. I want it to be long and wide and in proportion to the body. Just think about a little baby who got really tall but didn't get wide. They'd be like the thin man, which is scary enough. Okay. So that's going to be postnatal bone growth. How does it happen in a flat bone or in a regular bone? It's going to happen in the same way. Articular cartilage has to thicken so that you can kind of get a bigger outer area. And then you're going to have cells underneath the periosteum that are going to help you get wider as well. Actually, growth of like a flat bone is a little bit easier because you don't have to deal with the medullary cavity, the medullary cavity getting wider. Okay, so the other part is to look at after adulthood. So what's going to happen is you're going to have sex hormones that are going to be released. And as sex hormones get released, this cartilage here actually doesn't grow anymore, and it just ends up becoming bone. And that is what creates our epiphyseal line right here. So you see, as if we don't have cartilage here, we can't actually lengthen our bone. We have articular cartilage that we can thicken, but you're not releasing the right amount of hormones to do that anymore as an adult. You can still remodel your bone though, because you still have osteoblasts and osteoclasts. So if I want to widen my bone or reshift position my bone, all I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe lay down a little bit of compact bone right here. Let's say I'm a bodybuilder and I'm lifting 200-pound weights. I'm probably going to need a thicker layer on my medullary cavity because I'm pulling on that bone a lot more. So osteoblasts will lay down a layer of bone, and osteoclasts on the other side will again come through here and help us widen our medullary cavity if we need it. Maybe we keep that compact bone layer and it becomes a little bit thicker. Okay, the same thing here is if I want to kind of change the shape of this bone, I'm gonna need to make sure that I lay down a layer of bone underneath my hyaline cartilage, because there'll be some osteoblasts there and the hyaline cartilage will bump out. And then the osteoclasts will come in and they'll make sure that the thickness of the compact bone is remaining, and it just kind of changes like this, the shape a little bit of my bone based on how I'm using my bone. As I told you, if you're not using it, you're going to start to lose it because osteoclasts are going to start to come in here and they're going to start to degrade all this bone away because you're not pulling on it enough. If you're a bodybuilder or if you're using your muscles a lot, then you're going to come in and lay down more bone to reinforce the area. Sometimes I like to think about this as like, imagine hanging a picture on the wall. If the wall is very thin and the picture is very heavy, I have to reinforce the wall. There's no different than a bone. If I'm going to pull on the bone, I want to reinforce that area of the bone. If I'm not pulling on the bone, I don't need to reinforce that area and I can just get rid of it. So you see how remodeling is kind of like growth, but you're not going to grow super wide and you're not going to grow tall. You're not going to grow tall because you don't have that anymore. Once that's gone, I'm not going to lengthen at all. Okay. So what you should hopefully get out of like all of these videos is seeing compact bone versus spongy bone. You see where the different types of bone cells are found in our bone as an organ. You want to understand fetal bone development, compare and contrast those processes, and think about how bones grow in childhood, but then once you become an adult, you don't grow anymore because you don't have an epiphyseal line, or I'm sorry, you don't have an epiphyseal plate anymore. So come ask me any questions if you have any over this these concepts also.